Hey, Flowmies, welcome to another edition of the ITF Flowcast. This week, we're going to interview Martha Woodward. Now, she's the co-founder of the quality-driven software that's designed to help business owners be able to understand how their employees are doing, how effective they are, how profitable their work is, and also give you means to be able to incentivize their work. It's a really neat software. It's something that we're going to talk a little bit about the interview. But the reason why I want to have her on is because she's a public speaker. She has classes all on that deal with business culture. What is the culture that you have within your business? How do your employees feel about working there? How are you doing? All of these things have a factor on the bottom line of your business. And so we talk a lot about different things, such as what different leadership styles we might have in our business, what we can do about conflict resolution to help our employees and us to get along better, and how we can properly incentivize our crews to be able to get the best out of them. So you're going to really enjoy it. Some very valuable information. So let's listen in as we talk with Martha Woodward. Hey, Flowmies, welcome to another edition of the ITF Flowcast. And we are really happy to have Martha Woodward with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Martha.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Now, you are really well known in the industry because you are a person who really focuses on the culture, on teaching business owners to value the culture of their business. And that's why I really wanted to have you on. But before we get into that, so you are the co-owner of a software called the Quality Driven Software. And what is that? What's that about? How does that help business owners?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm actually co-founder and
Co-founder.
now the
Okay.
only owner.
Okay.
But it is a survey software, but really is not much about the survey itself. It's about client retention
Mm,
and the data that comes back into the software
gotcha.
is it provides metrics to run employee performance programs, employee accountability as far as disciplinary programs, etc.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I'm definitely interested in that. I know I talked to the likes about that. And I know they really value a lot of your input. But you also have your own service business that you run, correct? A maid service?
I do. I
Yeah,
do.
very good.
So I have a maid service that I've had for about 13 years, and it happens to be in a neighboring state. So I'm about 100 miles
Oh,
from
wow.
our office. And and that's really why I built Quality Driven, because I needed to be able to watch quality from afar and like
Excellent.
have more than a feeling
Right.
if we were doing well or we weren't doing well, but to actually have data. So yeah, I probably put about 4 or 5 hours a month in that business, and yeah, we keep
Hey, that's
going.
that's a pretty good trade-off right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I now I have an office manager who does all the
Right.
day to day, and she's great. But fun fact, she is located in Georgia, and
Oh
my
my.
business is in Oklahoma. And so we have zero management staff on site,
On site.
and
Wow,
yet,
that's amazing.
and maid service. I think maid service, if people are particular,
Oh, sure.
it's maid service is like top of the list because we're going in people's homes,
Yes.
in their private space, and we're not just at their windows,
Right. You're there for a
we're
while in
in
that
all
room.
of their personal space. So, I think it is quite a credit to be able to say that we can run that kind of business with nobody putting a thumb on our staff on a day-to-day basis. And but we have great staff.
Yeah,
So
that's the key, right? Hiring. I'm sure we can get into a little bit of that too in our conversation. But I think what's helpful too is because you do have a hand in running a business, you kind of have a pulse on how, like for instance, with your software, how that can really benefit small business
right,
owners. Because I think what I find sometimes when I talk to people who are, hey, I can help you run your business better, um, especially if maybe they've been detached from a business for a while and they sold their business and now my business is going to be helping your business grow.
right.
Um, over 5, 10 years, if they've been away from it, you can kind of lose touch on some of the nuances of running a business
Right,
now, you know.
right.
So I appreciate that you're still, even if it's just a few hours a month, but you still got your hand in it, and
Uh-huh.
you still are able to kind of know what are some of the quirks, and especially with COVID now. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of added such another layer to running a business, you know.
it has. It really has. And I'm glad we're not done, but I'm glad that we're getting
Let's
towards
cross
the
fingers,
light.
right?
Yeah.
Excellent, very good. So how did you get into the kind of the work of helping businesses develop their culture? Like, how did that even come about when you thought, I want to help other companies to run their business in a way that's productive for both the employer and the employee?
Well, um, by fire, I tell you, I I worked as a physical therapist for a long
Mm,
time. And then I had this harebrained idea that I was going to start a maid service. And I knew nothing about cleaning. I wasn't like I was OCD and I was this great cleaner.
sure.
I loved having my house clean. And I knew that myself and a lot of my friends always struggled with finding somebody dependable. And I had experienced Mary Maids where we lived somewhere else. And, I was like, I can do that. Well, anyway, I opened a maid service, and I've got to tell you, I spent my first 3 or 4 years absolutely miserable.
Oh.
And I would say probably regretting my decision to leave a great job and put up with that nonsense. And it was it just everything has evolved out of a need and a pain point. And so for me, it took me a good 3 to 4 years to wrap my head around. I could not lead people in the same manner that I led people when I was a director at a physical therapy department, because not to in any way bash any of our employees, but those employees that I led in the past, they had been through college
Hmm.
and persevered. They had
Hmm.
an element of self motivation,
Sure.
and so they didn't require much of me, and I didn't really have to put so many boundaries on those employees. And so when I got into the maid service, one of my missions is that I wanted to be a great boss. I really felt a calling for the fact that service employees have to put up with a lot. They've possibly come to us with a lot of damage, either
Hmm.
from possibly their home and the way that they were raised.
Hmm.
And then, maybe they've worked for jerk bosses,
Yeah.
because if you think about it, I mean,
Hmm.
they may feel a little more trapped in a job than now. I know a lot of employees leave on a dime, and
Yeah.
don't feel trapped, but they don't have as many possibilities, or at least they don't think they do, as we do. And
Sure.
so I think that they'll tend to put up with more. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that kind of boss. So in turn, my first 3, 4 years, I was too nice. Like, I was very wishy-washy. I was just getting trampled, and equated that with, I want to be a nice boss. I want to be flexible. I want to be. And then I finally figured out, I had a low, low point, and I finally figured out that, you know what? That's not being a nice boss. That is being irresponsible. That's an
Yes.
irresponsible boss. And that it really was my great employees that helped me see I could see the frustration in them with me, and it clicked finally that, oh, by, me making the choice to look away when, they're absent too much or this or that, I'm not only hurting myself, but I'm really hurting my best employees, because
Yes.
who do you ask to take up the slack?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's how, it was like I hit that and then decided, how am I going to fix it? And so that's when I
Wow.
started fixing it.
So how did you transition from getting to where you were happy with your system of leadership
Mhm.
to, okay, now I can kind of not really bottle it, but put it in a compartment where you can now say, hey, these are some things that you, as a window cleaner or a
Yeah.
soft washer or pressure washer, you can now take these things and bring this culture to your business.
Yeah. Well, that's only been in the last couple of years. And I
Okay.
was very slow to evolve to that, where I would feel comfortable saying, okay, yeah, I do know about that. It's not, I had, Megan likes, she really was probably the person, and I'm sure she'll listen to this, but she probably was the person who hardcore pushed me to bottle it up.
I,
And
I just have to say Megan is such a great cheerleader.
yeah,
If
she
if she
is.
if she
She
believes
is.
in you and she believes that what you're doing is great, she's such a great cheerleader. I really appreciate that
Yeah,
about her.
she was in the audience of a seminar I was doing at the huge convention.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, from that point on, Megan's like, you have to sell this. You have to do this. You have to. And it took me a while to be able to say that I'm really glad she did. But the other thing is, because I built the software with my co-founder, Maria Dorian, um, the software, while it seems like it's about surveys and scores
Mhm.
and all this, the software, as time goes on, I have found out that even my own software has evolved, and I needed the software to run the things in my company culture that I did. But for a long time, we had a disconnect, and I provided the software, but I didn't provide the teaching about,
Mm,
so here's how you take all that data and
interesting.
run programs, because I use that data for, bonus programs, disciplinary programs, career ladders, points programs, everything. And I think initially I didn't want to like say, hey, here's how you do it, or here's how you should do it. But then over time, what I found is people needed something,
Hmm.
so and that's how I got to teaching that. And I'm still a kind of a, well, if you want to do this,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm still like that, but I'm becoming more and more comfortable saying, listen, I know this is an easier road to hoe if you do it this way.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's really good.
So,
That's awesome, and I really appreciate that you do, because I know I'm like, I'm gonna take your classes. I'm going to. I just gotta make some time to take them, because I've been looking at them for a while now, and I really am impressed with how they're arranged. And I'm looking forward to getting to the meat of it.
yeah.
But I know a lot of what you're teaching has based on the leadership style of the owner in the business. So what are some different leadership styles that you've seen, and like which are the ones that you really want to avoid, that you kind of see a lot and it's kind of a common mistake, and then
Mhm.
which are the ones that you're like, yeah, this is what you want to strive for when it comes to leading a crew of
Right.
people?
So I've definitely see a lot of the too nice or a pushover or whatever you want to call it. Um, and I think sometimes we label it as too nice, but it's just fear of enforcing rules, fear of people leaving, and I
Oh,
get
sure.
it.
Yeah.
Um, that's one style. Another style is kind of the dictatorship, where there's really no communication within the company, and it's just everything is handed down, and it's not two-way, it's one way, and there's really no trust in that type of a leadership system. Like, for instance, maybe it's a style where you're not sharing the, like, you don't want your employees to know what you're charging for that job, or you wouldn't share, I mean, there's no way you can't share the address, but you wouldn't share let them see any of the client contact information because they might steal your clients,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But really, the reason that they have to worry about that kind of thing is because there is no trust in that
Right.
company. There is no mutual respect. And when you're doing it just one way, I'm the boss, you're the underlings, then you're kind of cultivating that type of
Yeah,
culture. And
absolutely.
and the only way to keep it going is to be withholding of information and so forth.
I've had
So
that exact conversation with a fellow business owner, and we were talking about that, and he was asking me, well, do your employers know what, or your employees know what you're charging? I said, well, of course, yeah, it's all in the customer file. When they
yeah,
collect, they got to know how much it is. And he's like, oh no, you can't do that because they're going to start their business, they're going to know what you charge, they're going to undercut you, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, so you want me to create an environment where my employees already know I don't trust them, and I'm going to assume that they are going to stab me in the back.
right,
Why would they do anything more than what's bottom line to help my business, other than what's just expected of them? Because
right,
now I've established a purely secular relationship with this individual, whereas I trust, that I'm giving them trust, so that means that they know I trust them. They're going to want to keep earning that trust, and if someone did happen to break away, I have enough confidence in our quality, our reputation,
yeah,
that we can withstand if we happen to lose a couple customers.
right,
And if a person is that sneaky and has that lack of ethics to try and
right,
use that information, they're not going to last. They're
right,
not going to my that I'm gonna withstand that. But I think that's a really good point, because when your employees feel like you trust them and you're
right,
on their side like that, it's like that's when they're willing to go through a wall for you. That's when they're really willing to go the extra mile, when they see that you value them as an individual and as an asset to the business, rather than just a little pawn that you can use and then flick away when you don't need anymore.
right, right. And I mean, I absolutely have had a employee leave and try to take some clients. I've had that happen to me. But like everything else, if you're running it the right way, you're going to get that now and then, but you can't design your company culture around those few bad
Yeah.
apples and just ruin your whole culture to
Hmm.
prevent that little bitty chance.
Hmm.
And I think people find that the more that they run it the way you describe, then the more that you know all of these great things start happening,
Hmm.
and you allow people to flourish in your kind of system.
Yeah.
So, and personally, if I couldn't trust my employees with that kind of information, then the first thing I have to ask myself is, why
Why
would I
would
even
Yeah, why
have
would I
that
hire?
employee here?
Exactly.
And and then the second thing is, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
Why couldn't I? Because when you work at a retail store, or at a restaurant or whatever, you know what they charge,
Hmm.
I mean, if you wanted to put the math to it, you could figure out what the store's doing every day and so forth. And so you know, if you're not making your business seem enough like a true business, that there's a lot that goes on behind
Mhm.
that money,
Yes.
and it's not going into our pockets 100%.
Right.
So, and even about that, I educate about twice a year. I educate the staff on our expenses. I talk
Yes.
percentages and where things go so that they understand. And I especially do it if I feel like I have somebody that I'm questioning. It's basically, well, let me just show you that this is a little harder than you think. And then
Yes.
if they don't get it with that, then I'm like, well, more power to you. You don't steal my customers, but more power to you. Go try it and see how easy it is,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
it's not, and we know that.
Yep. And I think that's important to do, especially if they're asking for raises as well, is
Yeah.
to educate them, because that's what I always tell my employees is I say, look, I want to pay you as much money as I can, because the more I pay you, the more
Mhm.
you're going to want to stay with me, the more you're going to want to keep this job, and you're going to want to do your best to ensure that you maintain, your standard of living. However, what you do has to the business has to justify paying you that. And
Right.
if I'm paying you so much that we're losing profit because you're not meeting the back end of it, then why would I give you a raise? It makes no business sense, And so we'll
Right.
break down, these are the expenses. Look, this is what you needed to be a lead. This is where the next raise is going to be for you.
Yeah.
But if you're not able to meet those basic requirements to be a lead, I can't send you by yourself to a job, or I can't send you where I have to send you with someone who's experienced, not with someone who's learning. So now
Mhm.
you lose value to the company, because now you can't be used in this thing. But whereas if you had these qualities, now you're an asset to the company, because you now can form your own crew. And now
Right.
that's another avenue of income for the business. And I'll pay you for that. But
Right.
but if you're not willing to do these things, and it's always the guys who are always late, and it's always the guys
Yeah.
who, are
Absolutely.
complaining about other workers and stuff, and then they're the ones who are asking for the raise after 3 months of working for you.
Yeah.
But you have to educate them to understand, it's not, I don't just have a bag of money and I just decide, oh, maybe I'll pay you this today, maybe, it's like, no, there's formulas that go into determining what I can afford to pay you to make it worth sending you out on a job, and
Right.
and
Right.
helping them to understand that sometimes gets them past the whole, like you say, that magic curtain of the business, that there are actually things behind there that are happening and are expensive and cost
Right.
money behind just that money that they see the customer paying the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of transparency. So, we talked a little bit about that, but so the people listening, they're not going to be able to see what I have behind me, but like that is a career ladder. And it, I have on our career ladder, and it's posted in the office,
Awesome.
big for people to see. But before they ever come to us, if they do what they're supposed to do, they should be able to look up there and say, oh, shoot, okay, I got to get that one thing
Yeah,
before
that's
I
that's
can
a really
ask for a
good idea.
promotion.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, I am a big believer in putting everything in their hands,
Hmm.
so I'm not responsible for your success. You are responsible for your success. And the only way I can do that is if I make it, that roadmap, think of it
Yeah,
as the atlas of how you get from here to here.
sure.
I have to make all those steps really, really clear. And I have my walls are just, here's how you get this bonus. Here's how you get this bonus. And then this is how I really met Megan is I talked about that my employees have a bonus tracker, and they get that at the beginning of the week. I make them track their own revenue, their own everything. And then they tell us if they got the bonus. And the thing is, the reason I went that way is because one day I was in the office when they were doing payroll, and this is when some of us were still in the office, and I was watching her person doing payroll, I was watching her having to figure out all these bonuses, and it was really time consuming. And
Sure.
believe me, the time invested in pay for performance is absolutely worth it because it drives everything. But I thought this is really tedious. And so, it was another light bulb moment where I'm like, well, why are we figuring out if they got a bonus? They need to own it. And, and a lot of the bonuses, it's an incentive.
Sure.
So I want them to see on the plate, how far they are from getting that bonus. And if they're tracking it themselves, they know exactly what they have to do to get it. And then the other part is if people don't turn in their bonus tracker, or if they say, no bonus, then we don't have to go verify all that.
Right.
We only verify the ones that say they
That say
got
they
it.
did. Oh,
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
So,
That is brilliant, Martha. I love that.
well, I've got the lazy style of leadership, and the less that we can do, the less busy work. I want all these programs to run, but really, it makes perfect
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
And I once had a girl interview with me, and I was telling her about our bonus programs, and she said, I love that. And I think I must have told her, you track your own bonus and blah, blah, blah. She goes, I worked at the bank. And she said that we would get monthly bonuses, but we would never know till the next month, about halfway in, if
Mhm.
we got it or not. And she said the only way we'd know it is it would appear on our check.
Yes.
And if it didn't appear on our check, we didn't get it. But we had no idea.
I
She said it felt like a crapshoot. She was like,
yeah,
and it also felt like favoritism because
sure.
there was no, transparency, and you were like waiting and like up, but didn't get it. And she said, so you never tried harder
Right.
because you didn't think it mattered.
You didn't know if they were gonna get the payoff.
Yeah, she said it felt very arbitrary.
I
I'm sure she didn't use those words, but that's the way it felt for her. And that validated, I'm like, heck yeah, exactly if you're
right.
getting it or not.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I love that. I used to work for a bank. I was a teller for a while. I know exactly how that felt. And like you
Yeah.
said, and the thing was too, so you had quotas you had to hit, then you
Yeah.
had bonuses, and you knew when you hit the quota, but you
Okay.
didn't always know when you hit the bonus. And I
Mhm.
know that feeling of like, well, gosh, should I, it's a long day and the customer's already
Uh-huh.
annoyed with you. Do I push these credit cards? Do I,
Right.
because, how close am I? Do I really
Right.
want to have a rotten day and then still come short? And you just had no idea because it would fluctuate, and you
Right.
didn't know what you had. You didn't know if you gave a form to someone, did it really close? I mean, you just had zero idea. And then you work hard. And then, like you said, you'd show up, look at your check, nothing. And you just be
Yeah.
like, oh, well, why am I going to try then? So
Right.
I love that transparency because then they know
Right.
where they're at, and if I just push a little harder, if I can get a review, or if I can get this done in this time frame, that's wonderful. I really love that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just, it's a kinder, more fair way to do things, in
mhm,
that we always you always just want to empower people. And then when they hit it, we I mean, even though these are weekly bonuses,
mhm.
I still believe and try hard to make sure to acknowledge when people hit their bonuses. And we do the little memes and this and that in our private groups and say, hey, so and so got the productivity bonus, so and so got the attendance bonus. And it does a few things. There's your attaboys. And if you think about it, our employees really aren't, for the most part, goal setters. So this is our way of setting goals for them and go, wow, you made it. You made
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And giving that positive reinforcement and making them feel better about their job and
Excellent.
the performance that they have at the company. So
Yeah.
it just is, it's it's really incredibly easy to do if you step back and look at it. And yet people don't do it because they think it's too much trouble.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like it's a huge thing. I know
It
for me
feels
as a
that
business
way. Yeah.
owner, but like you said, if you just kind of take a overview of it and look at what you're doing, it is some work initially, but after a while, once it kind of gets going, then it's going. It seems like it's kind of self-propelling. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And I would say we probably, and when I say we, my office manager probably spends an hour or so a week on those type of programs.
mhm.
But oh my gosh, if we didn't do it, we would be spending probably 3 to 5 hours on fixing problems.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, how do you want to spend your time? And
Right. Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that information. That was great. Now, the next topic I wanted to kind of ask you about, because I've heard good things as well, is regarding to conflict resolution. And you've got a crew of guys or girls, and you guys are there, and they're working together. They're long hours, sometimes hard work. It's natural that there's going to be some headbutting. So what do you do when there's a couple people who just really seem to not get along? Just for my situation, we had a situation where there was two, and it wasn't terrible. I mean, it wasn't like they were coming to blows or nothing. They just were annoyed with each other. They just didn't when they worked together, neither of them had a good day.
right,
And so as much as I could, I tried to keep them in separate crews. And as long as we did that, that was great. But there was some times I had no choice. I had to put them together because that was what the schedule dictated.
uh-huh,
And one guy eventually quit, and it was fine. But I never really felt like I resolved anything. I mitigated it, but I never really tried to make the situation work. And I kind of like what you were saying about being too nice. I felt like I let the business suffer. I let these guys dictate how
right.
I ran my business because I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable with that. So, what are some advice you have for business owners who are trying to deal with those type of interpersonal personnel situations?
And I would say this is probably the hardest, more subjective thing that you have to deal with in your culture, because you're going to have personalities that clash. But I will tell you, when you have A level employees that are doing their job, typically they are not that hard to get along with. Most of those employees can kind of roll with the punches
Hmm.
as long as their partner's doing their job.
Hmm.
That's typically where I see the problem, is when that person is pulling them down.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to lie, that becomes even more relevant when you start doing pay for performance and you start mixing these customer satisfaction scores in their pay. And then it does create more of a rift, and much more quickly, when you have some C&D players on the team. So ultimately, you have to figure out who is the C&D player. You might not know initially. So one thing that I tell people is, you really, most of us, it's just human nature. We as management bosses want to ignore it. We see it and we're like, dang, they're not getting along, and we think it and we do all that, but we really don't address it, and we let it fester until we kind of have to do something about it. And believe me, I've done it. I've seen it. And what I've found is you just got to hit it on head on. And so, now I'm not in the office much anymore. And in fact, because of COVID, none of us, we kind of evolved into a new style of we go straight to the house and so forth. But when I was in the office and the teams were coming into the office, I would be the person, I'm telling you, if you just looked unhappy or looked ticked off or, or sometimes I would say something and somebody'd give me an eye roll or something. And I mean, and we had a great level of communication, but I would be like, okay, I think I want to talk to you and get more into this, And the thing is, when you have conversations often and about little things, it's easy. It's
true.
just that it's easier to not do it. But it's kind of like the other example is that you could spend a little bit of effort when it's small, or you could not spend that time, let it fester, let it build, and then have this big problem, which is probably going to implode to at least one or both end up quitting or getting fired. So hit it when it's small. And I start by talking to them separately. So I would talk to each person and say, hey, I kind of noticed that, it looks like you all aren't getting along, blah, 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 blah. And the other thing that I do is I don't take, that's fine. I don't take those kind of answers.
Right.
For an answer. I'm like, no, it's not fine. And I'm like, you're going to stay here until you talk to me. and I mean, I always equate it. I've got 2 grown kids now, but I kind of equate it to that, where your kids would be like, it's nothing, or whatever. But there was the attitude with it. And you're like, no, we're going to talk about it. And so anyway, I talk to them. I get out of them what they're feeling. And then if it's a he said, she said kind of thing, then I get them both together and say, you guys, listen, this is a job. You may not love each other as personalities, your personalities might not click, but what I need you to do is I need you to find a way to be able to work together in a professional manner where the client would never know there's a rift between you. And I don't care if you talk to each other at all after you get home, but we have to find a way to work together. And if you can't work together, then we're coming up with a different solution. I don't know what that solution is yet. And so I have them do their version of the story together. And then, so much of the time, so your employees do exactly what I described that you do as the boss. They're mad at each other, but they're not communicating with each other. So a lot of times what the employees say, you can tell it's the first time that they've ever heard their frustration. It kind of like a husband and wife that, the wife's mad about how they do the toothpaste or whatever. But they never say that, sometimes it's easy to fix if you just, and most of us are not taught to be great communicators. And so therefore we're not. And so that's the way I start. And then, and I leave it at, listen, this is not going to be acceptable. And so if you can't find a way to work together, I need you to come back to me and we'll come up with plan B. And
Mhm.
plan B might be separating them and putting them on different teams. But here's where quality driven comes in handy, is because we get feedback from a high percentage of our clients, and that feedback comes back even if they work as teams. The feedback is attached to individuals. So, if team A is employee 1 and 2 and team B is 3 and 4, but then you switch them up, then it's still going to follow that employee wherever they're
Interesting.
working. And so if I have to split people up, I can see the scores.
So
And
you
I
see
can
one
see,
following, one
yeah,
worker.
right. So if I've got this, you know, grade D employee that's causing the problems, and then I went and moved them with this employee that had high quality scores, then, well, that employee, the higher quality scores isn't going to like it either. But now I've got some data, and I've actually had to use that for unemployment. I've had, I've been able to show
Hmm.
that
That's
here's what
awesome.
I've done. And, so, I have to let my employees know I have your back. If you're doing your job, I have your back.
Yeah.
And you can separate out by what they did and those kind
Mhm.
of things. So I never knew that that was exactly what would come out of it, but it did. So that was
Interesting.
helpful.
Very
It is
good.
helpful.
And just to touch a little bit more about the importance of addressing it early, with those two guys that I mentioned earlier,
Uh-huh.
I was just like what you said. I didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I wanted them to be adults and to
Uh-huh.
work it out, you
Yep.
know. And a couple times where I had to address, I would just say, "Okay, look, you guys got to figure it out. Okay, figure it out."
Mhm.
And I left it like that. And then eventually I had to, like you said, have that sit down talk with them. But by the time I did, I was frustrated. So
Yeah.
I wasn't a mediator anymore. I
Yeah.
was now, what is wrong with you guys? Why can't
Yeah.
you? Is this
Right.
kindergarten? Is this, what are you guys, what am I going to have to do? Go get a switch from the yard. Here I'm, giving this talk to these guys.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't, it wasn't productive. I mean, they obviously got the point. They got the point that I was upset and that what they were doing was hurting the business. But it could have, I know I could have handled it so much better had I just taken the time in the beginning when I saw problems were developing
Right.
and said, wait a second here, there's something here. Let's address this now and get it out of the way, because it just really just boiled down to a personality issue.
Yeah.
There was one employee who just was very nitpicky and just very always
Mhm.
kind of looking for the negative in that guy. And
Yeah.
the other guy was just kind of going along, but now he's getting annoyed because he keeps, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. He's getting annoyed that he's this who was a younger guy and newer to the window cleaning industry was
Yeah.
telling him how to do his job.
Yeah.
So that could have easily have been if I had just sat him down and just said, look, he's the lead, you're the tech. What he says goes. He has the authority in this. Now, if there's really an issue, let me know and I'll deal with it. But I don't want you talking. And I did end up telling them that. But again, that was after maybe 2 months of turmoil that they had working together, and I could have avoided all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
addressing early on is always as uncomfortable as it may be. It's always better because then
Yeah.
you're not the one exploding too.
Right, right. And I forgot to say that one of the very first thing I do is when I pull them back and I get the story, and I have like usually there's one person more upset than the other. The
Mhm.
other, a lot of times, it's just like, I don't know what's wrong with them. And so when that person starts telling me what they're unhappy about, my first thing that I say is, have you talked to them? And I mean, it's amazing that,
Very few times, yeah.
and it happened, I mean, 95% of the time, no, they haven't told the appropriate person. My husband still does this. He's a pharmacist, he works, and he'll be mad at somebody, and I'm like, have you talked to them? He's like, I'm not their boss. And I'm like, but you're two human beings that, have to coexist. And if you could just say, hey, that bugs me. Can you not do that? You know, and so it, I don't get it why there has to be drama. And people say, I don't like confrontation. Well, if you just have a conversation
Yeah.
and discuss it, it is not confrontational. But I think so many of us, our communication style is you don't say anything, you don't say anything, you don't say anything, and then you blow
Then
up.
explode. Yeah.
And so that's why they think, well, I don't like confrontation,
Right.
because they never went through the conversations, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
So yeah, I and I don't remember being raised where we had to talk everything out, but I think it comes back to, for me, being fair. So there's no way for me to be fair to my employees if we are not all on the same level of awareness of the problem.
Yeah.
And I always say, if you're like my husband, where you're mad enough that you go and complain to somebody else about somebody and you haven't talked to that person, and it applies to me as the owner. If I'm complaining about somebody that works for me and I'm irritated with them, I sure as heck shouldn't be complaining about them if I've not talked to them.
Yep. Giving them a chance to make the
Yeah,
change.
right.
So we've been dealing with inter crew conflict. What about when it's employer employee conflict? And I'll give you a specific
Oh,
situation. I had one employee, young guy too, and he, I don't know for sure, but he seemed like, he kind of struck me like he was a little bit on the spectrum, where
mhm.
just kind of social cue
Yeah,
issues,
yeah,
hard worker, always on time, but was one of those that he was 19 years old and he would tell me how to run my business. you know,
yeah.
like he would call me up literally at 9 o'clock at night and we would spend 20 minutes him explaining to me why I needed to redo my cruise and
Uh-huh.
why I needed to do this and why am I not doing this, and I would and I would just be like, look, this is my family time. You're taking me away from my family time. So first of all, no, I'm not changing my cruise. Second of all, we'll talk about this tomorrow when you're on the clock. you know
Right.
and it just kept happening and happening, and no matter how I told him, you need to stop. We finally had a big heart to heart, and again, the same thing. I sat him down and I was really upset, but I told him how it was, and I told him, look, these are the lines. If you cross them, we're done. I'm firing you. And he just needed to know the boundaries.
Exactly.
And he
Yeah,
just needed to know when, because he didn't understand that he was crossing. In his mind, he's being this great help to my business, when in reality he's taking away my peace.
yeah.
And uh anyways, we ended up parting ways. But when you're having difficulty connecting with an employee and you seem like you're butting heads, what are some good strategies to help mitigate that? Obviously, if they're a bad employee, you get rid of them. I mean, I'm not talking
Right,
about that, but
right,
when you're talking about someone who has good qualities, but they just don't seem like you guys are meshing.
right. Yeah. Well, I think you have to be, as a business owner and leader, I think you have to be fairly self-aware. You have to, like, the very first thing that when we have a problem, I have to just figure out what's my role. What am I doing to perpetuate that?
Hmm.
And so I would have said, as, like, I have a real boundary rule, and that early on, nobody, you cannot call.
Hmm.
I will not answer any text after business hours. And back in the day when I was the one doing the scheduling and stuff, I told them, you can text me if you're sick and you think you're not going to be there tomorrow, but I am, I'll do a thumbs up or something. We're not going to have a conversation.
Hmm.
But, like, I'm very protective of my personal time. And I think that we need to be with our clients and with our employees for sanity's sake. People need to understand the boundaries.
Yes.
But the other thing is, because, if you didn't engage with him, he wouldn't have repeatedly called you in the evening.
I encouraged him because I felt like I was showing him respect, but with someone who is not catching the social cues, that was meaningless. It meant green light. You have permission.
Exactly. But you know what? You could have respected him during work hours.
Yep.
And that you're off the clock during personal hours, especially somebody that is having boundary issues. But so with something like that, I have occasionally had a situation where, like, they were a good employee. As far as when I say good employee, good quality, good attendance, no attitudes, but there was just something about them. And usually that just something about them is entitlement for me. That there's just something about them that hits me wrong. So I have to figure out, okay, so what is it that bothers me about them? And, is it really like a quality issue, an attendance issue, blah, 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 that I need to deal with? And that's cut and dry, and I need to deal with it. Or is it just that feeling or that? And so when I have something like that, and again, for me, when I've had it, it's usually that they act a little entitled. Then I make sure to be very clear with my expectations and so forth. And I hate to say, but when I get the opportunity to make sure that I let them know they're not entitled, like, I am actually the one running the show, because I don't act that way, as far as I don't want to be that kind of leader.
Like that dictator that you mentioned earlier.
But so we're very open communication, and like I just had a staff meeting with them yesterday, face to face, and I always leave thinking, oh man, I love them, they're great. But occasionally I'll get somebody, because we do have open communication, I'll occasionally get an employee that'll be like, well, I think we should do this, or I think we should do this, and in kind of an entitled way. And I'll be like, okay. So, I usually just put questions back to them. So, about how much money you think that costs? And, and then say, okay, so if we're just making budget now, where would I get that money? And I just start trying to show them. And so, yeah. And then a lot of times when I get that sense of entitlement, then we go through that process. And we recently went through it with wanting a pay raise. And it was when, we were not growing in COVID and all that. And I said, so I cannot give you a pay raise when we're not bringing in additional money. And we also had a problem with planned absence time. So my staff are primarily females, single moms. They take a lot of time off for appointments and etc. And so what I did is, a lot of times I'll say, okay, so I hear your problem. I hear what you're asking for, and I will come back to you the next meeting and tell you, can we do it? Can we not do it? And so I had my office manager figure out over the last 6 months how much revenue we had lost due to planned time off. And because that is one of the things that we say in our job ads, that we're flexible and blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, with planned time off. And so anyway, I came back and it was like a number like 15,000 or something.
Wow.
And so I came back, and but that's kind of easy to do when you have multiple team members over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back with that number, and of course that number sounds big to everybody. And I'm like, so here's a problem, because I'm flexible, and this is actually, you could consider a
A
benefit,
benefit.
a
Absolutely.
raise in some
Absolutely is.
way. And,
Yeah.
and because I do allow all of this planned time off, it actually hurts the business, you guys. And so if you were actually to be here more, then we would generate more revenue. And I want to be flexible, but it's a give and take. And so I said, I go, here's what I'll do. And so that's when I put in an attendance bonus. I said, I will pay you X amount more an hour if you've not missed any time. And the only thing I exclude is paid vacation time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In my company, they earn everything, including paid time off.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get any time off. They earn paid time off. And like the higher performance, the more days they get. But so I don't penalize them on something they earn, but something they take, like unpaid time off, I do. And so I just made it to where, okay, here's your raise, but guess what? You have to show up for the
Awesome.
entire shift,
Yep.
for every day, and so that's how we did it. And
Awesome.
so
love
I
that.
do try to empower them as much as I can, but make
Yeah.
sure that it's a win-win for both of us.
Yeah, that's really good. We're just about out of time, but I did want to talk a little bit more about this incentivizing because yeah, it sounds like the kind that you've mentioned right now seem very effective, but I also know, not for me personally, but I've heard others horror stories of
Yeah.
incentive programs that have gone really wrong. And of course, look, our employees are smart. If
Yeah.
they know that there's some loophole or there's some way to maximize an incentive program, they can easily take that program and where you're losing money now, and you
Yeah.
now have to honor it because that was what you set up and you're keeping your word. So
Right.
what are some hallmarks of effective incentive programs for employees that aren't going to break the bank for the employer?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is, you can't slap an incentive program on a toxic culture, because
Good
then
point.
like it seems like the carrot and the stick approach versus that you're actually rewarding them.
Gotcha.
And so that's the first thing I would say, is that you kind of have to have your culture somewhat in order, or at least semi-healthy before you do it, because it'll seem like the wrong motives. But the other thing that I would say is that when you launch a program, you flat out say, so I've tried to think of everything. And, you know, and I tell my employees, this needs to be a win-win for both of us. And so I want to reward you with this program, but I might have to make tweaks along the way
Okay.
if there's something I haven't thought of.
So add some
So
fine
for
print.
example, yeah, and I think people think once they launch it, they're stuck with it. And again, if you have open communication, you can come back and say, okay, you all, I did not think of if this happened. So for example, I have a productivity bonus, and if they hit certain amount of revenue for the week, uh, and their quality score is above a certain level, then they get an extra $1.50 an hour. Well, what happened to me one time was, and I think it happened a couple of times, and I was like, stop, so somebody hit the productivity bone, the revenue, they hit their quality score, but they could still hit the quality score, but they had a complaint that caused the customer to leave us. We're mostly every other week type of service. And so when a customer cancels, then that's about $2,500 of revenue for the year from that customer.
Yeah.
So as I am paying their bonus, I'm like, they
Why am I
just
doing
lost
this?
us. Yeah. So I came, I'm like, okay, just like our laws, there's an addendum. And now, and you can't have like 10 addendums, but now I'm like, I went back and explained, okay, I'm like, I'm not calling anybody out, but I'm telling you, I cannot write you a bonus and I just lost $2,500 revenue. I can't do it. And so, and then it was like, but what, what if it's da 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 da, what if it's a crazy client or a blah blah blah? And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you this. That was 1 week, and you start fresh next week. And I'm not making exceptions. If I lose a client because of the job that you did, I am not writing you a bonus check, and you know what? They get it. They get it. And if they don't get it, they're not the kind of employees that are going to stay working for me. So, I want reasonable people. And as long as, it would be a whole nother thing if I just said, no, you're not getting the bonus. And from now on, and then that sounds like, oh, she's just making it harder so we can
Right.
never get it,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you so much for your time, Martha. We really appreciate it. That was very helpful. I think we're gonna have you on again because I still have a ton of other questions. So maybe 6 months down the road, we'll bring you back again. You can bring some other points to help us out. But
Sounds
uh,
good. I
th-
can
th-
talk. I'm sorry.
no, that's awesome. It's really great stuff. I mean, and like I said, we have so many other aspects of how to build a culture, a good culture in your business, that we need that in ITF. So thanks for taking the time.
That.
We appreciate you, and we look forward to your continued work in ITF as well, helping us out with those.
Yeah, I'll see you in the group.
Sounds good. And thank you, Flowmies, for listening. Hope you have a great week. You guys take care and flow on.